Galaxy predators feared no one until they encountered humans. Part 1. The Cathar had ruled the stars for longer than most species could remember. Their warships, black as void and sharp as fangs, moved without warning. Planets burned. Civilizations vanished. No one stood against them. No one even tried. The Cathar did not negotiate. They did not spare. They conquered, and the galaxy learned to bow. Their soldiers were tall, scaled, and cold-eyed. They wore armor forged from the bones of their enemies. Their weapons fired plasma hot enough to melt rock. Their commanders spoke in guttural clicks, and their victories were never questioned. Across 1,000 light-years, the mere whisper of their name sent entire systems into panic. To see a Cathar vessel on your scanners was to know your world had hours, maybe minutes, left. Then came the signal from Epsilon 9. It was a small mining colony, tucked into the outer rim of human space. Barely a dot on star charts, mostly forgotten, mostly quiet. Humans had settled there a generation ago, digging for rare metals in the frozen crust of a dead moon. They lived in domes, worked in shifts, and sent their ore back to the inner systems. Nothing about them suggested danger. Nothing about them suggested they would matter. But something had happened there. The Cathar long-range scouts picked up a broken transmission. Static, then a voice, human, male, calm even as alarms wailed in the background. If anyone hears this, tell Earth we held the line. Tell them we made them bleed. Then silence. Then a burst of energy so strange it didn't match any known weapon signature. Curiosity was rare among the Cathar. Arrogance was not. Still, the High Command allowed a single scout vessel, Vorax Fang, to divert from its patrol route and investigate. The ship dropped out of warp near Epsilon 9's orbit, its sensors sweeping the surface. What they found confused them. The colony was gone. Not just destroyed, erased. The domes were shattered. The landing pads cracked open like eggshells. But the destruction wasn't clean. It wasn't the smooth, total annihilation the Cathar usually left behind. This was messy, chaotic. Traps were still active, wires humming with charge, pressure plates buried under ash, drones circling low with no pilot inside. The ground was littered with scorched metal, broken tools and bodies. Some human, some not. Because there were Cathar bodies too. 3 of them. Lying near the main gate, their armor cracked, their throats slit with something crude. A mining saw, maybe. Their blood had frozen black in the thin air. This had never happened before. No species had ever killed a Cathar warrior on the ground and lived to tell of it. Yet here they were, dead, in the dirt of a worthless rock. From the shadows of a collapsed tunnel, a man watched. His name was Liam Carter. He had been an engineer once, fixing life support systems and drilling rigs. Now he wore patched fatigues, a rifle slung over his shoulder, and a look in his eyes that said he had nothing left to lose. He'd watched his friends die when the raiders came. Not Cathar, not at first, but pirates using stolen alien tech. He'd fought back. Then the real Cathar arrived, drawn by the noise. And Liam had done the impossible. He'd made them pay. He didn't know they were legends. He didn't care. To him, they were just more monsters trying to take what wasn't theirs. The Cathar scout team moved cautiously through the ruins. Their leader, Commander Zorvak, sniffed the air. "Smell that," he growled to his second. "Fear sweat, and something else. Anger." They found a data pad half buried in rubble. It showed schematics, human designs, but modified. Explosives wired into ventilation shafts. Acid tanks rigged to collapse on command. This wasn't defense. This was ambush. Zorvak laughed, a dry, clicking sound. Clever vermin, but soft. They ran. He was wrong, Liam hadn't run. He'd waited. Deep beneath the colony, in a maintenance shaft the Cathar hadn't scanned, he crouched beside a detonator. His hands shook, but not from fear. From exhaustion. From grief. He thought of Maria, who'd died holding the east gate with nothing but a welding torch. He thought of kids in the nursery who never made it to the bunkers. He thought of Earth, so far away, probably unaware that Epsilon 9 even existed, but he wasn't doing this for Earth. He was doing it for them. He pressed the button. The ground erupted. Not with fire, but with force. The humans had drilled deep, planted shaped charges along fault lines and turned the moon's own geology against its invaders. The explosion wasn't huge, but it was precise. It collapsed the main access ridge, buried 2 Cathar under tons of rock, and sent a shockwave through the scout ship's landing struts. Vorak's fang listed sideways, alarms blaring in its cockpit. Zorvak roared, scrambling for cover as debris rained down. By the time he regained his footing, the humans were gone, except for one. Liam stood on a ridge 50 meters away, rifle raised. He fired once. The shot wasn't meant to kill. It hit the scout ship's comms array, silencing it. Then he turned and ran, vanishing into the maze of tunnels. Zorvak wanted to chase him, wanted to tear him apart with his bare hands, but protocol demanded he return to the fleet. And for the first time in his life, he felt something unfamiliar: hesitation. Back aboard his ship, wounded and humiliated, Zorvak filed his report. He described the traps, the dead warriors, the human who looked him in the eye and didn't flinch. The High Command listened in silence. Then they made a decision. This species would not be ignored. They would not be spared. They would be crushed, utterly, completely, as an example to all who dared resist. But as the Cathar war machine began to turn toward human space, whispers spread among their ranks. Not of victory, not yet, but of something new. Doubt. And far away, in the dark between stars, Liam Carter drifted in a stolen cargo pod, low on oxygen, low on hope, but alive. He didn't know he just changed the fate of two civilizations. He only knew he had to warn someone, anyone, because the storm was coming, and this time it wouldn't stop at one moon. Galaxy predators feared no one, until they encountered humans. Part 2. News of the Epsilon 9 incident reached Earth 3 weeks later. It came in fragments: scrambled logs, broken transmissions, and one shaky video feed showing a human man standing over a dead Cathar warrior. At first, the United Stellar Command thought it was a hoax. Then the long-range sensors picked up movement near the Helios sector. Hundreds of ships, thousands, all bearing the jagged sigil of the Cathar Dominion. Admiral Nora Brooks stood on the command deck of the orbital station, Ares Watch. Her arms crossed, her face calm. She was in her late 50s with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too many wars. She'd fought in the Martian uprising, held the line during the Titan revolt, and lost 2 brothers to border skirmishes with raiders. She knew what fear looked like, and she knew how to bury it. "Confirm fleet size," she said, her voice steady. "Initial count, 400 warships," replied an officer. "And growing. They're mobilizing everything." Nora nodded. She didn't panic. Panic got people killed. Instead, she issued orders. Every colony in the Helios sector was to go on full alert. All civilian ships were to evacuate or prepare for defense. Every military vessel, from frigates to freighters retrofitted with guns, was to report to staging zones. Earth wasn't ready for a full-scale war, but they wouldn't go down without a fight. While the admirals planned, ordinary people prepared. On Cerberus Prime, a dusty world known for its iron mines and stubborn settlers, a schoolteacher named Ben Harris stood in front of his classroom one last time. The children were gone, evacuated on the last transport. Now the room held rifles, medkits, and maps pinned to the walls with nails. Ben wasn't a soldier. He'd taught history and basic mechanics, but when the call went out for volunteers, he was the first to sign up. He gathered the townspeople in the old community hall. Farmers, miners, shopkeepers, even teenagers too young to leave. They had old hunting rifles, mining lasers, and a few military-grade pulse guns donated by a passing patrol ship. Ben didn't promise them victory. He promised them purpose. "We don't have their numbers," he told them, standing on a crate so they could all see. "We don't have their ships, but we know this ground. We know how to dig, how to hide, how to hurt them before they even see us." They dug trenches that night. They buried explosives under roads. They wired drones with cameras and scrap metal, turning them into flying traps. They practiced ambush drills in the canyons, using rocks and shadows as cover. Some cried. Some joked. All of them worked. Back on Ares Watch, Nora studied the Cathar approach pattern. They moved like a wave, relentless, predictable. They always struck the strongest point first to break morale. So she did the opposite. She left the Helios gate lightly defended. Just enough ships to look real. Just enough soldiers to seem like a proper garrison. The rest, they hid in asteroid fields, in derelict stations, in the blind spots of Cathar scanners. Human ships powered down, cooled their engines, and waited. Pilots like Maya Ruiz, sharp-eyed, quick-handed, with a reputation for flying like she had a death wish, sat in cockpits for days, sipping recycled water and checking their weapons. When the Cathar arrived, they did exactly as expected. Their fleet descended on the Helios Gate like a storm. Plasma cannons lit up the dark. Human ships fired back, but they were outnumbered, outgunned. The station's shields flickered and died. Hulls cracked open. Bodies floated in the vacuum. But then something strange happened. Just as the Cathar began boarding operations, hidden human ships powered up. Not to flee, but to attack. From behind asteroids, from inside cargo bays, from the shadow of a dead moon, they struck. They fired EMP bursts that fried Cathar targeting systems. They rammed their own ships into enemy engines, sacrificing themselves to cripple larger vessels. One freighter, piloted by an old miner named Dale, flew straight into the bridge of a Cathar destroyer. The explosion tore both ships apart. The Cathar had never seen anything like it. Their warriors were trained for clean battles, for surrender, for domination, not for enemies who fought like cornered animals, smart, desperate, and willing to die just to take one more with them. On the ground of Cerberus Prime, Ben watched the sky burn. He saw the flashes of distant explosions. He knew the Helios Gate was falling, but he also knew it was buying them time. When the first Cathar drop pods hit Cerberus soil, they landed in empty fields. No welcome party, no easy victory. As the reptilian soldiers stepped out confused, the ground beneath them exploded, mines triggered by motion sensors. Then gunfire erupted from canyon walls. Drones buzzed overhead, dropping small incendiary charges. The Cathar fired wildly, but their targets were ghosts. Ben didn't lead from the back. He was in the thick of it, dragging wounded to cover, tossing grenades with hands that shook but never missed. He took a plasma burn to the shoulder but kept moving. His people followed because he asked nothing of them he wouldn't do himself. The Cathar pulled back after 6 hours. They'd lost 30 soldiers, more than they'd lost in the last decade combined. Their commanders were furious. Their warriors were shaken. For the first time, they questioned their orders. Back at Ares Watch, Nora received the reports. The Helios Gate was gone. Over half their fleet was destroyed. But the Cathar had taken heavy losses too. And more importantly, they were confused. That was the crack in the wall. And humans knew how to widen a crack. Nora sent a message to every surviving colony. They think we're weak. Show them we're not. She didn't speak of hope. She spoke of action, of resistance, of making every inch of space cost the Cathar blood. On Cerberus Prime, Ben patched his wound with a torn shirt and stood on the roof of the old school. He looked at the stars and thought of his students. He hoped they were safe. Then he turned to his fighters, farmers with rifles, kids with drones, old men with grudges, and said, "They'll be back. Next time we hit them harder." No one argued. No one ran because something had changed. The fear was still there, but it no longer ruled them. Now it fueled them. And far away in the heart of the Cathar fleet, Commander Zorvac watched footage of the battle on Cerberus. He saw humans dragging their dead, reloading weapons with bleeding hands, laughing as they set new traps. He turned to his second-in-command and said, "These are not prey." For the first time, a Cathar warrior sounded unsure. The galaxy had always bowed to the Cathar. But now on a dozen worlds, humans stood up, and they were just getting started. Galaxy predators feared no one until they encountered humans. Part 3. The Cathar were angry. Their ships had been damaged. Their warriors had been killed. And worst of all, their pride had been hurt. They decided to end this quickly. They would not just attack human worlds, they would erase them. Burn them from orbit. Turn cities to glass. Make sure no human child would ever be born again. But Earth Command had other plans. Admiral Nora Brooks knew they could not win a straight fight. The Cathar had more ships, more weapons, more experience, so she chose a different path. She called it Operation Nightfall. It was not about defense. It was about striking deep, fast, and hard, right at the heart of the enemy. The target was Varnak 7, a gas giant in Cathar space. Around it orbited the largest shipyard in the Dominion. Hundreds of warships were built there. Thousands of workers, slaves from conquered worlds, kept it running. If they could destroy it, the Cathar war machine would stall. Maybe long enough for humanity to catch its breath. The mission would be carried out by a small team. 5 stealth corvettes painted black, engines muffled, hulls cooled to match the cold of space. No names on the ships, no signals sent, just ghosts slipping through the dark. Leading the mission was Maya Ruiz. She was young, with sharp eyes and quicker hands. She'd lost her whole family in the first Cathar raid on the outer colonies. She didn't fight for glory. She fought because someone had to. Her crew trusted her, not because she gave long speeches, but because she never asked them to do something she wouldn't do herself. They trained for weeks in simulators, memorizing patrol routes, shield frequencies, and emergency exits. They studied stolen Cathar schematics, pieced together from wreckage and prisoner interrogations. The journey took 10 days. 10 days of silence. 10 days of checking systems, eating tasteless rations, and listening to the hum of life support. Maya barely slept. When she did, she dreamed of fire and falling. They entered Cathar space through a dead zone, a patch of space littered with asteroids and radiation that masked their heat signature. It was risky. One wrong turn and they'd be torn apart by rocks or spotted by a patrol. But it worked. They slipped past the outer sentries like shadows. Varnak 7 loomed ahead, a swirling ball of red and orange gas. Around it, the shipyard hung like a metal spiderweb. Dozens of dry docks, hundreds of construction drones, warships in every stage of build. Some just skeletons of metal, others nearly ready to fly. Maya's voice was calm over the comms. Stay low. Match the orbital drift. No sudden moves. They drifted closer, using the planet's magnetic field to hide their approach. Their plan was simple. Get inside the main control hub, plant fusion charges on the stabilizer towers, and blow the whole thing apart. The towers kept the shipyard from being pulled into the gas giant. Without them, gravity would do the rest. Getting in was the hard part. They waited for a supply freighter to dock. Then, using stolen transponder codes, they mimicked its signal and slipped in behind it. The Cathar scanners blinked once, then cleared them. They were inside. The team split up. 2 corvettes stayed hidden in the cargo bay. 3, including Maya's, moved toward the central hub. They wore captured Cathar armor, bulky, uncomfortable, but good enough to fool a quick glance. Their faces were covered. Their steps were slow and heavy like real Cathar warriors. Inside the hub, it was chaos. Slaves worked under the watch of armed guards. Lights flickered. Machines groaned. The air smelled of oil and fear. Maya's team moved fast. They disabled 2 guards with silent takedowns, took their weapons, accessed the main terminal. The charges were placed in under 10 minutes. Magnetic discs stuck to the base of each stabilizer tower. Set to detonate on a timer, but then an alarm sounded. A slave had seen them. Not a Cathar, a human, thin and pale, working on a coolant pipe. He stared at Maya. She froze. He didn't shout. He just nodded once and turned back to his work. He knew what they were doing. He wanted them to succeed. Still, the alarm had been triggered. Not by him, but by a system glitch. A power surge from the planet below. The Cathar guards snapped to attention. Patrols doubled. Go! Now, Maya whispered into her comm. They ran. Back through the corridors, past confused workers, past barking orders in guttural Cathar. One of her team took a plasma bolt to the leg but kept moving. They reached the docks just as the first enemy ships powered up. Their corvettes launched without full checks. Engines screamed. Shields flared. They shot out of the shipyard like bullets, weaving through half-built warships and construction cranes. Behind them, the timer hit 0. The first explosion was quiet. A deep rumble felt more than heard. Then the second. The third. The stabilizer towers collapsed one by one. Without them, the shipyard lost its anchor. Gravity from Varnak 7 pulled it down. Metal groaned. Docks snapped. Warships still under construction tumbled into the gas giant's atmosphere, burning up like falling stars. The plasma storm that followed swallowed everything. Ships, drones, slaves, guards. The entire shipyard vanished in a swirl of fire and pressure. Maya's ship shook as the shockwave hit. Alarms blared. Oxygen levels dropped. But they were alive. They jumped to warp just as the first Cathar warships arrived. Too late. Back at Ares Watch, Nora watched the long-range sensors go dark over Varnak 7. She didn't smile. But she stood a little straighter. The cost had been high. 1 corvette lost, 2 crew members dead, but they had done it. They had struck the Cathar where it hurt most, Not in battle, but in pride. In power, news spread fast, not just among humans, but across the galaxy. Other species heard what happened. A small group of humans had slipped into the heart of the Dominion and blown it apart. The Cathar were not untouchable. On Cerberus Prime, Ben Harris gathered his people around a broken radio. They listened to the report. Someone started clapping. Then everyone did. Not because the war was over, but because they finally believed they could win. Maya returned to Earth weeks later. She was tired. Quiet. She visited the memorial wall and placed a small metal tag next to her family's names. It read, "For you." She didn't speak to reporters. Didn't want medals. She just went home, sat on her porch, and watched the sunrise. But in Cathar space, panic grew. Their ship production had halved. Their slaves whispered of rebellion. Their warriors looked at the stars and wondered if humans were waiting in the dark. The galaxy had always feared the Cathar. Now, for the first time, the Cathar feared something else, and that something had a name: humanity. Galaxy predators feared no one until they encountered humans. Part 4. The Cathar were done playing. Their shipyards burned. Their warriors died in strange, messy fights. Their pride was shattered. Now they would show the humans what true power looked like. The High Overlord himself gave the order: glass every human world. Burn them from orbit. Leave nothing but ash and silence. The fleet that gathered was the largest ever seen. Over 1,000 warships, carriers, dreadnoughts, siege engines that could crack planets open like eggs. They moved as one, a wall of metal and fire aimed straight at the heart of human space. Earth Command knew they could not stop it head-on. Even with every ship, every soldier, every weapon, they would be crushed. So Admiral Nora Brooks made a choice. She would not defend Earth. She would lure the Cathar into a trap. The bait was Titan's Reach, a dead world, dry and cold, with no people, no value. But hidden beneath its surface was something the Cathar did not know about. A weapon called the Anvil. It was not a bomb, not a gun. It was a gravity projector, built from old alien tech and human math. When activated, it bent space itself, crushing everything nearby into a single point. The plan was simple. Make the Cathar think Titan's Reach was Earth's last stand. Draw their whole fleet there. Then turn on the Anvil. But someone had to play the bait. Ben Harris volunteered. He was not a pilot, not a soldier by training, but he knew how to act desperate, how to look like a man with nothing left to lose. He would take a broken freighter, the Marlow, rigged with fake signals, false heat signatures, and a looping distress call that screamed, "Last refuge of humanity." His crew was small, just 5 others, all volunteers, all ready to die. They launched from Cerberus Prime under cover of night. No fanfare, no goodbyes, just a handshake, a nod, and a promise to make it count. As they flew toward Titan's Reach, Ben checked the cargo hold. It was filled with scrap metal, old engines, and empty fuel tanks, all designed to mimic the energy output of a hidden fleet. The Cathar would scan it and think they'd found Earth's final stronghold. Maya Ruiz would lead the real strike. Her squadron, 12 fighters, the last of the best, would hide in the asteroid belt near Titan's Reach. Their job was not to fight. It was to wait. And when the moment came, they would dive into the Cathar fleet and take out their shield generators. Without shields, the Anvil would work. The days passed slow. Ben's crew played cards, told old jokes, fixed small leaks in the hull. No one talked about what would happen when the Cathar arrived. They didn't need to. Then the scanners lit up. Hundreds of blips. Then thousands. The Cathar fleet dropped out of warp in a perfect arc, surrounding Titan's Reach like wolves around a wounded deer. Their comms crackled with victory chants. Ben sent the final message. "This is Captain Harris of the Marlow. We are the last. Come and get us." He didn't sound afraid. He sounded tired. And that made it real. The Cathar took the bait. They moved in, confident, arrogant. Their warships powered down their long-range weapons. They prepared boarding parties. They thought it would be easy. That was their mistake. Deep in the asteroid belt, Maya's voice cut through the static. "All wings, this is Razor 1. Shields go down in 3 minutes. Hit them fast. Hit them hard. And don't look back." Her fighters shot forward like arrows. They weaved through debris, engines silent until the last second. Then they fired. Plasma bolts tore into the Cathar shield emitters. Explosions bloomed across the hulls of the biggest ships. The Cathar scrambled, confused. Where did these fighters come from? Why weren't they on their scanners? But it was too late. On Titan's Reach, a hidden bunker opened. A single technician, alone, sweating, hands shaking, pressed the button. The anvil activated. Space itself twisted. Gravity spiked. Metal groaned. Cathar ships that had stood for centuries buckled like paper. Hulls collapsed inward. Engines imploded. Warriors were crushed before they could scream. The entire center of the fleet vanished into a silent, swirling point of broken physics. When the distortion cleared, over 300 Cathar ships were gone. Silence fell over the battlefield. Ben watched from his freighter. His ship shook from the shockwave but held. He saw the Cathar fleet break formation, saw panic in their movements, saw ships turn and flee. But he also saw Maya's fighters still out there, low on fuel, low on ammo, surrounded by the survivors. She didn't retreat. She led her squadron straight into the heart of the chaos. They fired everything they had, took down 2 more carriers, then 3, then a dreadnought. One by one, her fighters went dark. Maya's last transmission was calm. Tell my mom I kept my promise. Then static, Ben's crew sat in silence. No cheers, no tears. Just the hum of a dying engine. The Cathar retreated. Not because they were beaten, but because they were afraid. Afraid of traps, afraid of humans who smiled as they died, afraid of a weapon they didn't understand. Back on Earth, Nora received the reports. Titan's Reach was a victory. But the cost was heavy. Ben's freighter was damaged beyond repair. Maya's squadron was gone. Hundreds of brave souls lost. She stood on the command deck and looked at the stars. She did not cry, but her hands trembled. On Cerberus Prime, people gathered in the square. They lit candles. They told stories of Ben and Maya. They promised to remember. Ben never made it home. His ship drifted for days before rescue found him. He was weak, burned, but alive. When they asked what kept him going, he just said, someone had to hold the line. The Cathar did not attack again that cycle. They regrouped. They argued. Their High Overlord demanded answers. None came, because for the first time the hunters had become the hunted. And the humans, they were just getting started. Galaxy predators feared no one until they encountered humans. Part 5. The Cathar did not send warriors this time. They sent envoys. Thin, scaled figures in dark robes, their claws sheathed, their voices low. They arrived at the edge of human space in a single unarmed vessel, its hull marked with the broken sigil of surrender. No one believed it at first. Not after everything, but the signal was real. They wanted to talk. Admiral Nora Brooks met them on a neutral station near the ruins of Helios Gate. She wore her dress uniform but kept a sidearm hidden. Old habits. The lead envoy, a Cathar named Vrax, did not bow, but he did not sneer either. He studied her with eyes that had seen too much death. We do not understand you, he said, his voice rough but calm. You are soft. You break easily. Yet you do not stay broken, Nora didn't smile. We bend, we don't snap. The talks lasted days. The Cathar offered peace not out of kindness but fear. They had lost ships, warriors, shipyards. Their slaves were restless. Other empires watched, waiting to see if the mighty Cathar could be challenged. And humans had done more than challenge them. They had made them bleed in ways no one else ever had. In the end, a treaty was signed. Human space would be left alone. Prisoners would be returned. Trade routes would stay open but guarded. It was not friendship. It was respect hard-earned and fragile. Back on Earth, people celebrated. Not with wild parties, but with quiet relief. Lights stayed on longer. Children played outside. Farmers planted new crops. The war was not over everywhere, but for now it was over here. Liam Carter stood at the edge of a memorial garden in New Chicago. His name was on plaques now. Hero, survivor, leader. But he didn't feel like any of those things. He just felt tired. He placed a small stone on the wall beside the names of his friends from Epsilon 9. He didn't speak. He just stood there watching the wind move through the trees. A group of schoolchildren walked by with their teacher. One boy pointed at Liam. Is that him? The one who fought the Cathar alone. Liam heard. He turned and nodded. The boy ran over, eyes wide. Were you scared? Liam knelt despite the pain in his knee. Yes, he said. But being scared doesn't mean you stop. It just means you care enough to keep going. The boy thought about that. Then he asked, will they come back? Liam looked at the sky. Maybe. But next time we'll be ready. On Cerberus Prime, Ben Harris walked through the rebuilt town. Houses had been patched. The school was open again. New students sat at old desks. He didn't teach anymore, but he visited often. He told them stories, not just of battles, but of courage. Of neighbors helping neighbors. Of choosing to stand when running would have been easier. He still wore his old coat, the one with the burn mark on the shoulder. Kids called it his hero coat. He never corrected them. Far above, in orbit, Maya Ruiz's name was added to the Hall of Stars, a quiet room on Ares' watch, where the lost were remembered. Pilots left small tokens on her plaque, a flight pin, a candy wrapper, a pressed flower from Earth. No one forgot her last words. They lived by them. Nora Brooks stepped down as admiral a month after the treaty. She said she'd done her part. A younger officer took her place, someone who had fought at Helios Gate who understood that peace was not the absence of war but the result of strength. She moved to a small house near the sea. She grew tomatoes. She read old books. Sometimes she watched the news and saw human ships helping other species rebuild after Cathar raids. She smiled then. The galaxy changed after that. Other empires sent messages. Some asked for alliance. Some asked how humans had done it. A few came to learn. They saw human cities, messy, loud, full of arguments and ideas. They saw how humans argued fiercely but stood together when it mattered. They saw how they turned pain into purpose. The Cathar never attacked again. Not because they were weak, but because they finally understood. Humans were not prey. They were not easy. They were stubborn, clever, and dangerous in the quietest ways. They built traps from scrap. They flew into fire for strangers. They stood on broken ground and said, "Not here," and that changed everything. Years later, a Cathar child asked an elder, "Why do we not go near human space?" The elder looked at the stars and said, "Because they do not fear us, and that makes them the most dangerous thing in the galaxy." On Earth, a new generation grew up hearing the stories, not just of war, but of what came after, of rebuilding, of reaching out, of never forgetting what it cost to be free. Liam visited the memorial one last time before he died. He was old then, his hair white, his steps slow. He touched the names of his friends and whispered, "We held the line." And somewhere in the dark between stars, human ships sailed on, no longer running, no longer hiding, just moving forward like they always had. Because the galaxy had learned a new truth. The Cathar feared no one until they met humans, and that fear would echo for a long, long time.